Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here on the 20th anniversary of Netroots Nation and to follow David Brenya, Frequency, to follow Colette Pynchon Battle and Reverend Gregory Manning as they talk about 20 years after Hurricane Katrina, and to have just gotten to reunite with and interview Malik Rahim, who is the original founder of the Common Ground Collective. It's remarkable to be back in New Orleans. It's not only the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, it's also the 80th anniversary of the dropping of the only atomic bombs ever used. One August 6th, 1945, the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, Japan. Well over 100,000 people killed there. And 3 days later, today, August 9th, 1945, the second atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki. And I want to talk about the importance of independent media in talking about this story. One of the people who was in the squadron of planes that dropped the bomb 80 years ago today on Nagasaki was the New York Times reporter William Lawrence, known as Atomic Bill Lawrence. This is how he described the detonation over Nagasaki that incinerated or irradiated some 100,000 people. Lawrence wrote, "Awestruck, we watched it shoot up upward like a meteor coming from the earth instead of from outer space, becoming ever more alive as it climbed skyward through the white clouds. It was a living thing, a new species of being born right before our incredulous eyes," he said. He wrote, "Being close to it, watching it as it was being fashioned into a living thing." He's talking about the atomic bomb, so exquisitely shaped that any sculptor would be proud to have created it. One felt oneself in the presence of the supernatural. I want to compare his reporting to that of Wilfred Burchett, an Australian journalist who defied General MacArthur's blockade of all of southern Japan, saying journalists could not go there, but wanted to see with his own eyes. And he took a train for 30 hours and he ended up in Hiroshima. He saw the shadows of people seared into walls and sidewalks. He met people with their skin melting off in the hospital. He saw patients with purple skin hemorrhages, gangrene fever, and rapid hair loss. Burchett was among the first to witness and describe, well, what is now known as radiation sickness. He sat down in the rubble with his baby Hermes typewriter, and his dispatch began in Hiroshima 30 days after the first atomic bomb destroyed the city and shook the world. People are still dying mysteriously and horribly. People who are uninjured in the cataclysm from an unknown something, which I can only describe as the atomic plague, he said. He went on to say, Hiroshima does not look like a bombed city. It looks as if a monster steamroller has passed over it and squashed it out of existence. He wrote, I write this as a warning to the world. This report that was sent around the world shook the U.S. War Department. General Leslie Groves, they understood how dangerous it would be. They denied the radiation sickness, said it was Japanese propaganda. They brought William Lawrence, their reporter, I'll explain why in a minute, back to the Trinity test a few weeks before to try to prove that there's no such thing as radiation sickness. They called it Japanese propaganda. William Lawrence wrote a 10-part series on the dropping of the atomic bombs. He won a Pulitzer Prize for this. Oh, I forgot to mention, it turned out he was not only being paid by the New York Times, He was also being paid by the War Department, by the Pentagon, and he would write the press releases for Secretary of War Stimson and President Truman, very proudly saying how much he appreciated pushing the atomic effort. We need independent media. That warning to the world is so important. But that's the good news being here in New Orleans, because there is independent media. I want to congratulate Current Affairs on their 10th anniversary. I want to thank the stations that run Democracy Now! Here, like WHIV, which is sponsoring the after party and is so important. WLAE, public broadcasting, is under so much attack, which broadcasts Democracy Now! WTUL at Tulane, WBOK, also WAMFLP, community radio. These are important independent media outlets. There's a reason why President Trump has clawed back, has ended the Corporation for Public Broadcasting by clawing back $1.1 billion that was already allocated. He's afraid of independent media. And I also want to acknowledge my colleagues at Free Speech TV who are doing interviews here through these days. And we're carried statewide on LPB3, Public Broadcasting third digital channel, weekdays live at 7 a.m. There is independent media that's thriving here and all over the country. It just needs your support because it is people-powered. Now, I'm going to speak super fast, I come from Pacifica Radio, which was founded in 1949 out in the Bay Area in California by a man named Lou Hill. He was a war resister, came out of the detention camps, and then said there has to be a media outlet that is not run by corporations that profit from war, but by journalists and artists. And that's how Pacifica Radio was born. As George Gerbner, the late dean of the Annenberg School of Communications, would say, not run by corporations that have nothing to tell and everything to sell, that are raising our children today. And so KPFA went on the air in 49, KPFK in Los Angeles in 59, my station in New York, WBAI in 60, where you'd hear debates between Malcolm X and James Baldwin, the effectiveness of nonviolent civil disobedience. WPFW in Washington in 77. Oh, and well, Alberto is here from KPFT doing nonstop interviews as well. KPFT went on the air in 1970. Within weeks, the Ku Klux Klan strapped dynamite to the base of the transmitter and blew it to smithereens. When they got back on their feet a few weeks later, rebuilt the transmitter, the Klan strapped 15 times the dynamite to the base of the transmitter and blew it up again. It would take months before they could rebuild. Oh, I think it was blown up in the middle of Arlo Guthrie singing Alice's Restaurant, and I thought that was a good song. But anyway, January of 1971, they went back on the air. Arlo Guthrie came back to Houston to finish his song, and it has been broadcasting ever since. I can't remember if it was the Grand Dragon or the Exalted Cyclops, because I often confuse their titles, but he said it was his proudest act. I think that's because he understood how dangerous Pacifica is, how dangerous independent media is. Dangerous because it allows people to speak for themselves. And when you hear someone speaking from their own experience, it breaks down the bigotry and caricatures. When you hear a Palestinian child crying out for food or their mother, when you hear an Israeli grandmother, when you hear an uncle in Afghanistan or an aunt in the South Bronx, it challenges what you know. You don't have to agree, but it makes it much less likely that you'll want to destroy the person. I think the media can be the greatest force for peace on earth. Instead, all too often, it's wielded as a weapon of war, which is why we have to take the media back. Now, part of that is ensuring that people can speak for themselves, which takes me to Israel's war on Gaza. the horror of what's taking place before the world's eyes. In the US media, and I'm not just talking about Fox, MSNBC, CBS, CNN, how often in these last years have you heard a Palestinian or a Palestinian American describing their own experience? Again, you don't have to agree, but just hearing their lived experience. A while ago, about a year ago, we had on a Virginia cardiologist. His name is Dr. Tariq Haddad. He grew up in Gaza. He had been invited under the Biden administration by Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, to a roundtable meeting. He sent back a letter explaining his refusal to attend. He broke down as he spoke on Democracy Now! He said, "Some context is necessary here to understand why I turned that invitation down. I have hundreds of family members in Gaza, both sides of my family in the town of Khan Yunis in Gaza City. I've had about 100 family members at this point who've been killed, including physicians, pharmacists, lawyers, engineers, dozens and dozens of children, multiple small babies. My cousin Jamal Al-Fatah, his son, who is a physician, Dr. Tawfiq Al-Fatah, his wife, who is pregnant, two of their beautiful daughters, Reem and Khala, Jamal's brother Assam, wife Samad, and their daughters Rosso, Tuka, and Nadian, multiple generations all killed." He continued to recite the names of family members. Now, 18 months later, Dr. Haddad's family has lost more than 200 members of the family. So we had Dr. Tariq Haddad on recently again with his daughter, Serene Haddad. Oh, she's a star. Virginia Commonwealth University, completed 4 years and 3 years, a psychology major. And she had a protest about a year ago. She was one of those organizers of the protest. She was brutalized by the police, ended up in the ER. And this year, right before she was going to graduate, they had a commemoration of the encampment the year before. They all sat out on the ground. About 40 students. One observer likened the peaceful assembly to a picnic, but this time again, it was broken up by police. Serene was targeted as an organizer, and along with another student was told that VCU would withhold their diplomas. She had gone to school, had gotten her degree, had earned her degree. Well, last week or the week before, we had Serene and her dad, Tariq Haddad, on Democracy Now! Sitting next to each other. She appealed the decision, and 82 days later, she won. By the way, one of the things they were telling her was that she would have to take a class in ethics and morality. So we talked to Serene after she won back her diploma. She said this was not VCU choosing to do the right thing or waking up and realizing they had made an error. This was the result of pressure on a case that they could not defend. It was the result of truth prevailing, and they were left with no choice because the truth was always on our side. She said, "I cannot separate this small victory from the reality that at this very same moment, millions of Palestinians are being starved in Gaza intentionally, systematically, and with the way that we can, She said, I'll try to remember, so I'm paraphrasing, not quoting. And she said, "I think the same thing that is stopping those voices from being heard there, they tried to suppress our voices here on campus." My colleague Dennis Moynihan and I write a weekly column, and we said after she won her diploma, I wonder if they would also offer her a chance to teach a class on morality and ethics. So I also want to acknowledge the hundreds of Palestinian journalists who have covered what the ongoing slaughter in Gaza, who have lost their own lives, either bombed, shot, or now starved, watching these journalists get thinner and thinner, going through the same thing that they were covering for the rest of the world. And as Prime Minister Netanyahu says, starvation? What starvation? There's no starvation in Gaza. He's being repudiated by countries all over the world. I just say one simple thing. Why not let in international journalists and they can report what they see? There's a reason he's not letting them see those images. He understands their power. Now, I have to wrap up, and I just want to say that story reminds me of Mamie Till. She had something very important to teach the press of today and to teach all of us today. We're coming up on the anniversary of Emmett Till's murder. 14-year-old boy from Chicago. His mom sends him down to Money, Mississippi to be with his aunt and uncle and cousins in the summer. And he ends up being lynched by a white mob. When his body was sent back to Chicago, his mother, Mamie Till, did something incredibly brave. She said that she wanted the casket open for the wake and the funeral. She wanted the world to see the ravages of racism, the brutality of bigotry. So thousands went by his casket and saw his distended, mutilated head. And then Jet magazine, a black magazine, published the photographs that were seared into the history and consciousness of this country. Yes, Mamie Till had something very important to teach all of us. Show the pictures. Show the images. That's what we must do in Gaza. That's what we had to do with Katrina 20 years ago and whatever comes next. Because people in this country are compassionate if they know. Which brings me to the end, to the White Rose Collective in World War II. I was steeped in these stories as a young Jewish student and then Jewish journalist. The story of the White Rose Collective, of Hans and Sophie Scholl. He was in medical school at the University of Munich. She was an undergraduate at the University of Munich. And they weren't Jewish. They were German Christians. I was always amazed growing up. I went both to regular school and to Hebrew school. Why would people put themselves at risk if they weren't Jewish to save Jews during the Holocaust? Why would they hide a kid in a barn? Why would they try to ensure that someone, if they possibly could be saved? And I learned deeply from my rabbi grandfather and from all the members of my family, never again means never again for anyone, anywhere. And so Hans and Sophie Scholl, with their professors and other students, made a series of 6 pamphlets. On one of those pamphlets were written the words, "We will not be silent." They distributed them everywhere. They would drop them from the atrium of their school. They would throw them into alleys in the middle of the night. They would throw them into marketplaces. They eventually were caught. They were charged. They were tried. They were convicted. And they were beheaded. But that philosophy, that motto, should be the Hippocratic oath of the media today, should be the Hippocratic oath of us all today. We will not be silent. Democracy now.